How I became particle physicists enemy number one. Let's see what's going on with Sabine.
I didn't plan on becoming particle physicists enemy number one, but that's what I've been for the past years. Now that this time is almost over, I hope, I want to try and explain what happened and how I think we can make progress in the foundations of physics. Spoiler alert, not by building bigger particle colliders. I believe that many of you heard of me first because I was criticizing particle physicists' plans for a bigger collider, among other places, in the New York Times. Here are some of the reactions from particle physicists. Seriously, fuck you. This person does not need this kind of soapbox.
Okay.
I find your comments respectless. It would be a good idea for you to leave basic research. You do not have the spirit needed. It is one thing to no longer be able or want to continue to do physics research, quite another to foul one's own ex-nest in public. If you were wondering why there are so few physicists who draw attention to the problems with their own discipline, this illustrates the problem. Physicists are not exactly welcoming of criticism.
Well, I mean, it's not specific to physicists. This is true of anywhere, so... at least in my experience, this is true anywhere. If you raise your voice and criticize or give feedback, that's usually met with disdain. So I think that's just human behavior.
But I didn't just wake up one day and decided to crap on particle physicists.
Are you sure?
I swear it's not what happened. I'd spent the previous 15 years trying to understand why the foundations of physics stopped making progress in the 1980s.
Yes.
I believed then, and I still believe today, that I know why. Physics is one of the oldest disciplines of science.
Well, one of the main reasons, I mean, just sort of, I don't think it stopped since the 1980s, but one of the main reasons is because one key input to help us understand reality is to speed up the process is the knowledge that UFOs exist. So that's a key insight into the fact that our physics is very limited and would have helped everyone push boundaries by just the simple concept of we still don't know how that works. So this is what we know now clearly is not everything. So...
And as the research area matures, it becomes more difficult to find new observations that don't fit into the existing theories. They become increasingly removed from our everyday experience. Experiments become more difficult, larger, more expensive. As a consequence, serendipitous discoveries become incredibly unlikely. You don't coincidentally discover a Higgs boson. It took decades and billions of dollars to build a machine that could do it.
Right.
The time of serendipitous discoveries in physics is over. But without new discoveries,
maybe not. Let's see.
We can't confirm new theories, and so progress slows down. This is what you'd expect. Indeed, that progress has stalled per se isn't the origin of my worry. That progress slows as scientific disciplines develop is normal to some extent. No, my primary worry is the seemingly endless stream of wrong predictions that physicists have put forward and continue to put forward. You see, we don't have infinite resources. And if experiments become expensive, we must decide very carefully which ones to do. What happened in the foundations of physics is simply that physicists have been extremely careless. They've been throwing billions of dollars at useless experiments that didn't get us anywhere. This is why progress has stopped. For almost 50 years, they built new experiments because they wanted to test some shiny new theories. Ideas like grand unified theories that predicted proton decay, supersymmetry that predicted all sorts of new particles, extra dimensions that predicted black holes at the Large Hadron Collider, and many other things. They didn't find any of those. Why? because these ideas are mathematical fiction. They're not proper science. In the foundations of physics, you find tens of thousands of such predictions for stuff that they just made up.
Right.
And this story isn't over. It's still going on as we speak. They're now talking about entire dark sectors of particles that you can't measure. And a new branch of nonsense production that I have to talk about more at some point is all sorts
Right.
of modified gravities. The archive is now full of those. But we know that historically, new theories in physics have been successful if they solved a problem with the existing theories. The physicists at the time often didn't know this, all right, but it's evident if you looked at what worked and what didn't work. A new theory in physics needs to solve a problem, either an internal problem in the theories, like Einstein's theories did, or how the Higgs boson did, or a tension with experiment, like quantum physics did. The new ideas are not of this type. Axion, supersymmetry, grand unification, extra dimensions, and hundreds of dark matter particles and weird fields. They don't solve any problems. They only solve problems that physicists have made up in the first place. These so-called problems are all aesthetic misgivings about the current theories, and so based on historical precedents. This means that the new theories are very unlikely to be correct. This is a conclusion that I arrived at a few years after my PhD. Theoretical physicists and the foundations are using the wrong methods of theory development. The methods that they currently use have zero chance of succeeding. By the current standard, there are infinitely many theories that are acceptable, so the chance that any one of them is correct is 1 over infinity. You can see new examples of this almost every day in some press releases, where some group of physicists put forward a new theory for dark matter or for the Big Bang or some supposed modification of black holes. None of those are solving any problem. They'll all vanish in the big toilet flush of published literature. It's incredibly tiresome that this insanity is still going on. And because I became convinced that the methods that physicists use to make these so-called predictions can't work, I concluded that...
So I don't know, I'm listening along, I'm 50% agreeing with her, you know, like, so one half of me resonates. It is one of the frustrations I had with physics, and that's why I drifted away from theoretical physics towards quantum optics, and then I drifted towards quantum information theory, and then so 50% agrees with that, but the other 50% of me feels like Sabine still doesn't see the bigger picture, which is not to say that what she's saying is wrong, what she's saying is right, but basic research, basic science always looks like what she's describing. You don't know where breakthrough is going to come from unless you just go poking in the dark in some senses. And so you've got to give people the rope they need to poke in the dark. The issue is that there was supposed to be a lot more research and science in the West, in Western countries, that has not been happening. And because the economy has, in a sense, stagnated, it's not grown up as much as we hoped. And so the jobs that we were promised would be there growing up didn't exist the same way that we were promised climate change was being tackled. And yet in the West, nothing has happened on climate change. The country that has done the most for climate change is China. And so that's kind of what's been happening across the board, is everyone's looking around wondering, where's the money going? Why can't I do the research that I want to do? I thought we were all supposed to get research funding. So it's not so much that those physicists, mucking around with supersymmetry and axions or whatever should not receive any money to do that. No, that's not the case. The case is that there should be so much money that we should all be able to muck around. And so effectively going after the remaining pool of money and the people who have that remaining pool of money is not helpful. Um, but hopefully she can steer this conversation towards where is our money? Who, like, can you show us the receipts? Show us the wallet. Like, where is the government spending the money? Why is there not more money for research? And that's sort of like um, my interpretation, my understanding of what's been going on in the West is a lot of people getting angry and upset across the board and not really sure why they're angry or upset. And so they're going and venting and pointing fingers and poking here and there. The truth of the matter is that when I observe is just the shrinking part of money. And so life is not this comfortable living that we were promised, that the reason why the Enlightenment and all of that happened and industrialization, we'll have more time on our hands, we can have pleasurable careers, pleasurable pursuits, life is less stressful, there should be more healthcare for everyone. That did not happen. It kind of just fell right through. Not just through the cracks, it just completely bottomed out. And so these are important questions that need to be asked is, why are we not enjoying this lifestyle, including the lifestyle of getting paid a comfortable, guaranteed wage in order to do what you love? And so when I look at Sabine and hear her and read the comments, that's what I am seeing, right? It's not so much an attack on particle physicists that because of these guys, they screwed us over, they ruined everything. It's not that. That's what they're doing, but what the real reason why they're feeling that pain point is because where's the money gone?
That neither the LHC nor the existing dark matter experiments would find anything of interest, and neither would a bigger particle collider after that. This is why
And so that's also, I get upset when I hear some real bozos say like, oh, I remember in the 60s we sent a man to the moon, and then since then I guess there's been nothing. We haven't done anything for like the last few decades. We've just been sitting on our thumbs. That's complete garbage. I really get upset when I watch these talk show hosts. Someone says that and they'll sort of nod, they're quiet, including the people who are supposed to be on the blue side, on the left side, or whatever. And the bottom line is that this is absolute hogwash. This is an insult to NASA. This is an insult to the aerospace, sciences. We pushed robotics. We sent robots to the moon. We collected samples from the moon and other places using robotics, like across many nations. We sent robots to Mars. We took high-resolution pictures of Mars. We mapped out Mars. We sent satellites to Jupiter, across moons of Jupiter. We even took photographic images of Pluto. So, I mean, this is a massive undertaking. This is a huge accomplishment. It is not a waste of money. This should definitely have happened, but a lot more should also have happened. So it's not that, oh, this shouldn't have happened, something else should have happened. Absolutely not. Like, this is 100%. I get inspired. I was so inspired when I saw the pictures of Pluto published. And, in some senses to, poo-poo that, I think that's really silly. This was a massive scientific undertaking. This was a decided choice, right? It was a choice or strategy that robots can do far better science in hazardous areas than human beings can, and that's why we push robotics. It's not because we decided, oh yeah, let's just give up on this and do the second best thing, which is send robots. No, because we sent robots, we got far more results overall. So I think it's silly when people are like, oh, we sent a man to the moon and then we just stopped. No, we sent robots everywhere. We took satellite images of the extremists of our solar system. We sent up the Hubble telescope, which was a massive achievement. It opened our eyes to how big the universe really is. And then we superseded that with the James Webb telescope, right? So if these are all mumbo jumbo words to you and you're like, oh, I don't know what he's talking about, then that's your problem. You are not sitting down and listening to NPR. You are not sitting down and watching the sciences, right? It's a lack in the educational system in the West, I guess, that this is not common knowledge, that people don't walk around thinking like, no, we've done great research, things have moved forward. Something weird happened with our finance. That's what happened. Not that something weird happened with your sciences. Yeah, there's some weird shit happening there as well, but mainly what happened to our finances? Like, why? Like, where's our money gone? So, why is cancer not yet cured, right? A lot of questions like that. So, yeah.
I stopped working on LHC physics in 2005 before the LHC even turned on. In 2006, I turned down a very well-funded grant, the Eminöter grant of the German Research Foundation, because that would have required me to continue working on beyond the standard model physics at the LHC, which I had concluded is all nonsense. It was my own mistake to some extent. I shouldn't have applied for funding on a topic I didn't think was worthwhile.
Right.
But you see the problem. If I had applied for a topic that I actually thought was worth researching, I wouldn't have gotten the grant.
See, that's what I'm talking about, right? This is what I'm talking about. The complaint is not why are these bozos getting money, right? That's not the complaint. That's what she says. That's what a lot of people say. That's what her followers, you know what I mean? So her main complaint is not why are these bozos getting all the money, right? It's not even why are these bozos getting money. It's essentially, how come there's not enough money for me and my research? Like, where's all the money gone? So that's the real question, is where's the money gone? Like, as an American citizen and as a Swiss citizen, honestly, I have a PhD in quantum physics. I've done a lot in Silicon Valley. And it feels constrained. It does not feel like that wonderful life of opportunities, unless you're a software engineer, and even that's coming to an end right now. But it's really a constricted, terrible experience.
In any case, I turned it down. I might well be the only person in the history of that grant who ever turned it down. The university couldn't believe it. They thought it was a mistake. My friends told me I'm nuts. I accepted instead an offer from Perimeter Institute, which was objectively far worse. The only person who didn't question my sanity was my mother, who simply said, "You know what you're doing." But, well, I wasn't so sure. You see, there I was in my late 20s with that great insight about how current theory development in physics is all nonsense. And then there were some 10,000 intelligent people who thought otherwise. Whom would you have trusted? Me or the 10,000 geniuses? Well, I certainly didn't trust myself. It didn't help that at the time I had serious mental health problems and I couldn't exclude the possibility that I'm just not right in the head. I know this sounds like a joke, but it isn't. If you've ever had a mental health problem, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can't...
Again, like, looking back at my own life, mental health problem over here, you felt extreme stress and uncertainty and anxiety that leads to all sorts of other things, that leads you to question reality and everything. That's the symptom. What's causing the stress? Why are you in this position is because why isn't it easy for me to get this funding, right? I worked super hard in my undergraduate to get excellent grades. I worked super hard in the master's, switched over to theoretical quantum optics. I worked super hard in my PhD. And then in my postdoc, my first postdoc, I worked super hard at Stanford. And there was a lot of stress. They do not provide housing. I was going through a pretty traumatic breakup. And my boss, my prof, instead of being supportive, was the opposite of supportive. He was a complete jerk. And of course, if I look back, it was easy for me to say, I had mental health. No, I didn't have mental health problems. I was under a lot of fucking stress because the system did not support me. And I'm sure it was the same with her. Because you get to a point where you work super hard. You're told if you work hard, you get good grades. You work hard, you put out good quality, you get good results. life will reward you, the system will reward you, and it wasn't, right? So you get to a point where you sort of realize that the system is not rewarding you. Instead, it's the people who are going and hawking shit, right? The pump and dump people, those are the people who seem to be walking away, right? The Elizabeth Holmes, right? The people who did WeWorks. Those are the sorts of people who are walking away with nice, comfortable lives, having fun, on drugs, doing crazy things, right? The whole while they're watching the economy tank, right? You see the economy of the BRICS nations getting developed steadily, and you want to speak out. You speak out. You try to raise attention, and no one's paying attention, right? So every time you talk about stuff, anyway.
Can't trust your own judgment. So I considered this. I'm probably wrong, I might be crazy, but in the end I still didn't want to waste my time on what I thought was nonsense research.
You should not.
That would certainly not have benefited my mental health either. So I went to
Right.
Perimeter Institute and started working on something else. That didn't go well either, but
Right.
that's another story which shall be told another time. But I kept track of what was going on in particle physics. The
Right.
LHC turned on, it found the Higgs boson. That was the last remaining good prediction from before the nonsense era. It ruled out all the pseudo-predictions, as I expected. And then particle physicists started moving their predictions. They started saying, it'll just take longer to find these things. We'll find it in a few years or after the upgrade. And then we'll find it with the next bigger collider. You don't have to take my word for this. It's all documented in the published literature. That was in 2015, and that was when I decided to write my book, Lost in Math. In that book, I explained why these predictions were almost certain to also be ruled out, and why physicists need to step back and think about what's going wrong in their discipline. Because this isn't normal. It isn't normal for scientists to produce wrong predictions for decades and just continue doing this.
It's normal for humans to do stuff like this. That's how religions happen. So if you think about it, it's a little bit like Isaac Asimov's foundation, right? Even though it's science, but science becomes a religion unless people like us speak up and break through.
Something is very, very wrong here. I still believe that I made a good argument by saying we should focus on inconsistencies, but all I got was insults. And not because of the argument itself, but because of the conclusion that it led to. A bigger particle collider is a waste of money.
Yep.
Particle physicists, meanwhile, doubled down on their stories, which got wilder and wilder. The new big mega collider that CERN wanted to build would allegedly test dark matter. It would test dark energy. It would tell us how the universe began. And so each time a particle physicist went and promoted nonsense like this, I was there to explain why it's nonsense. I know why particle physicists hate me, but what was I supposed to do? Look away and just let them deceive the public?
Yes. Sabine, don't you know this is how the system works? You know. We've now become the Asian system. The nail that sticks out gets hammered. So, that's where it's starting to behave like a third world country. Keep your mouth shut, deceive the public, get easy money, and move on. What is this you're expecting to do? Like, get paid to do real discoveries? Come on, Sabine.
Someone had to do it. One day, the head of my institute received a call from a small group of people who said they're physicists at CERN. They requested that I be fired.
Wow.
This story has been communicated to me by the person who got the call. I can't confirm that it's true, but I see no reason why he should have made it up.
Right.
And it seems plausible.
Yeah.
I've also personally had to deal with particle physicists who yelled at me during talks, after talks, and of course on social media.
No, I mean, some of these people are really heartless. They're real jerks. I have a lot of stories, so I mean, some of these, I grew up with this image of a scientist, of like a mensch, but there are some who are really nice. But some are real jerks, and you just wonder, how is it that nice people allow them to keep their jobs? It's just one of those things which is just like, how is it that these nice people are allowing this jerk to screw over other nice people? And then you experience a lot and you understand, well, it's mainly just, they're just looking away because they want to preserve their easy income stream. But, yeah.
Almost all of these attacks were personal. They were about me, not my argument. They'd say, Sabine just wants to sell books, which, yeah, I want to, but my book wasn't about CERN's collider plant, so I recommend you buy 10 copies and burn them. Trust me, you'll feel much better afterwards. They'd say Sabine is bitter because she isn't tenured.
Mm-hmm.
But I stopped pursuing tenure long before any of that happened for personal reasons. And I'm not bitter. I'm a happier person today because I didn't give in and schmoozed with the nonsense producers. Though it's right that if I had been tenured, I'd almost certainly have kept my mouth shut about that bigger collider. They'd say I just want attention. I don't want attention, at least not for myself. I just want to draw attention to the problems that I see. If I could have done all of this anonymously, I would have much preferred this. I actually asked my agent about it, but he said no one would publish the book without my name on it. If you wonder how I cope with knowing that 100,000 people or so might watch this, denial. None of you's real. I'm probably not real either. Sometimes having a few loose screws in your head is actually a benefit. More seriously, if that's not what Sabine wants, then what does Sabine want? I just want them to think about what I'm saying, because the future of physics depends on it, and the future of science depends on the future of physics, and the future of our civilizations depends on the future of science. I believe I take the foundations of physics much more seriously than anyone else I know, with the possible exception of Eric Weinstein, but that's another story that shall be told another time. And this is the reason why I'm opposed to building this bigger particle collider. It'd be a disaster for the foundations of physics. It'd stall progress for another 50 years. It'd take up a lot of money, would encourage people to produce more nonsense theories. It'd do next to nothing for society, and it almost certainly wouldn't find anything of interest for anyone besides particle physicists. What we should do instead is focus on experiments in areas where we either have an internal inconsistency in the theories, like in quantum gravity, or an existing inconsistency between data and theory, like in astrophysics. Why, for example, do we not have a $1 billion research program for experimentally testing quantum gravity? This would, by all reasonable measures, be a considerably better investment. I also worry a lot that there is so little research on the foundations of quantum physics. It seems entirely possible to me that with all the quantum technology developments going on, there is a physics breakthrough hidden in the data already, but we don't know about it because we have no theory that tells us what to even look for in the data. There are a bunch of standard arguments that particle physicists usually bring up in favor of their big collider. I actually wrote a list for this about 6 years ago, to which I'll leave you a link below. I got one of the most idiotic arguments in reply to my New York Times op-ed from particle physicist Lisa Randall. It's what I call the money is wasted elsewhere too argument. In Randall's case, colliders are expensive, but so was the government shutdown.
What?
It's an idiotic argument because it admits that particle physics is a waste of money. Lisa Randall, by
I love how she sometimes just gloves off.
the way, got tenured for coming up with an idea for extra dimensions, of which no one has ever seen any evidence. I don't want to pick on her specifically. She's the product of an insane pseudo-scientific research trend. The people who are trapped in this, for the most part, don't understand it isn't proper science. In any case, Almost all of the arguments that particle physicists make for a bigger collider actually have nothing to do with that collider. They're instead arguments for some large science project. Any such large project would, have a chance of spin-offs, benefit technological developments in adjacent areas, make a contribution to education and so on. And that's all well and good, but if you want to invest into education, then just do that. You don't need to also dig a 91-kilometer tunnel along with it. Well, as I just said the other day, I think that at this point CERN's large collider plans have small chances of succeeding, partly because of the general economic situation in Europe. I may be wrong, because particle physicists have an extremely influential lobby among politicians, so I'm not totally counting them out yet. But what has become clear to me is that if not particle physicists, then a lot of other people now understand the problem with nonsense research in the foundations. So I'm cautiously hopeful that maybe, just maybe, I'll see progress in my lifetime. If this video inspired you to solve...
I don't know. I don't hold up. I don't hold out any hope. I think it's just going to be more and more frustrations in various dosages until eventually our bodies give up and fail. And our last thought in life is going to be, what the fuck? And on that optimistic note,